Hi everybody, Dr. D here again, and today we're going to expand on our understanding and give you a little bit different perspective in terms of the matrix assessment profile and the core influences that you're already familiar with. So at this point, you're already aware of the fact that there are three major influences to the biological environment, and those are the structure, the biochemistry, and the psychological, emotional, and spiritual realms. Now, there are also other influences that drive these influences, if you will, and they could be encapsulated in terms of a word or two like a psychological, neurological influence, or psychoneurological influence, or psychobiological influence, simply because, as you've heard me say on many occasions, we are, in fact, the biological end product of our interpretation of our perceptions. And what we're going to talk about today is part of the perception process with which each of us is exposed to as we come into this world, and actually prior to coming into this world in utero. So although there's no definitive school of science at this point to really refine an understanding of what happens prior to conception, once you're conceived and once you've become an embryo, you are now subject to what are called 5 core biological needs. And they're called core biological needs because they are specific needs that everyone is born with and is subject to in the process of developing into an adult human being. And these 5 core biological needs are essentially a need for connection, a need for attunement, a need for trust, a need for autonomy, and a need for love, sexuality. Now, in conjunction with these needs, there are also capacities for you to experience them. So you have the ability, you're born with the ability to embrace all of these biological needs, and depending on whether or not they're met and to the degree to which they're met or not met, is going to largely determine during the process of development from embryo up till around 6 years old, what your basic personality, what your basic view of the world is going to be, and how you, what skills you basically have acquired in terms of adapting to the environment in which you're born, into which you're born. So when we talk about the core need for connection, you have the capacity to fulfill that need, that capacity to be in touch with your own body, to be in touch with your own emotions, and the capacity to be in connection with other people. Now, there's a third element involved here, and this is basically the area of stumbling blocks or difficulties that occur when these needs aren't met. So in terms of the ability and the need for connection and the capacity for you to experience that need being met, there's a stumbling block of that need not being met and the things that develop as a result of that, which is why each of these 5 core biological needs is called developmental trauma. Because in fact, if these needs are not in some way, shape, or form met as you go through the development process, then there's going to be an obstacle to you integrating each of the needs, each of the functions of these needs into your own personality and into the way that you adapt to and the way that you interact with other people and the world in general. So the next core need is that for attunement. And this is the capacity that you're born with to attune to your needs and to your emotions. It's an attunement capability to recognize and reach out for and to take in physical and emotional nourishment from the outside and from other people, from the people in your immediate environment as you're going through the developmental phases of embryo to birth to 6 months old up to 6 years old. All of these things are now coming together to form a foundation for your personality and for your ability to interact effectively with the world at large. The next core need is that of trust, and obviously you have the ability and the capacity for healthy dependence and healthy interdependence. The next one is autonomy. Now, this is a capacity to set appropriate boundaries. So, in essence, it's the ability to say no and to set limits, and the capacity that you have is to speak your mind without guilt or fear of being judged. Now, love sexuality is the capacity that you have to live with an open heart, to just completely be open to the environment, to other people, and not feel like you're being duped, not feel like you're being disrespected, not feeling like you're not being needed, not feeling like you're not being loved, and not feeling like you're feeling needy. And then also you have the capacity to integrate in a loving relationship with a vital and fulfilling sexuality. So these 5 core biological needs, now met or not met, filter into the concept that I presented on a number of occasions, that being you're the biological end product of your interpretation of your perceptions. These are all perceptions, and the way in which you perceive each of these core needs as you're going through the developmental processes is going to determine the integrity of your biological environment, because all of these eventually affect your biological environment through the nervous system. And so when you hear a word like dysautonomia, which simply means complete chaos in the central nervous system, or global high-intensity activation, it typically means that one or more of these core biological needs has not been met adequately, and as a consequence, your capacity for experiencing the fulfillment of that need is traumatized. And as a result of that, you now have a challenge as you move into adulthood in terms of refining the way in which you interact with other people, the way you experience the world in general, and the way that your nervous system, in fact, translates an electrical process into a chemical process, ultimately causing a disruption or a compromise in the biological environment known as the matrix assessment profile. And so when we're looking at the matrix assessment profile, and I say that it is subject to 3 major influences of structure, of biochemistry, and psychological, emotional, and spiritual, here is where all of those influences originate. So these are the core needs. Associated with them are your core capacities, and associated with the capacity, the need being met or not met is going to determine to a large degree the integrity with which you're going to embrace the world on a daily basis, and the integrity of your biological environment, which is ultimately going to be displayed in the results of the matrix assessment profile. So thank you so much for being part of the Matrix membership program. And once again, I'm Dr. D. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to speaking with you again soon.